Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of Education Matters with Jim O'Connell. And we're here on Tuesday Night Live at 6 o'clock. The call-in number is probably on the screen for you, is 640-3091. I'd be very happy to listen to whatever you have to say. Like I always say, whether you agree with me or not, you're always welcome to call in. Just a couple of things, I guess. What's coming up this week, of course, is winter vacation for students. And I was just thinking about this today. Not that I'm going to go anywhere with it, but I couldn't. I hadn't really thought about it before, and I was thinking about this week. So we have President's Day off, and by the way, as a general matter, I'm all in favour of days off, but we've President's Day. Our schools are closed for President's Day, and then we have 4 days of school, and then they shut for a week. And I was in another district. It was in Pelham, actually, on Friday, talking to teachers there, and they said, "Oh, we don't take President's Day because we have school vacation week the following week, and it doesn't make any sense to, take. It's not of a high value to us to." We'd prefer to take that day off the summer or someplace else in the school year rather than the week before winter vacation, and that made a lot of sense to me. And I listened to a lot to what Dr. Vargas has had to say on these topics, and though I haven't heard him address that particular issue, I mean, generally speaking, he's been on constantly since he arrived here about more time with kids in front of an adult, more time with kids with a teacher, and that we're doing a disservice to the kids in this city in that they are shortchanged with the amount of time they have in front of the amount of instructional time, as he would put it. So. I don't know what's happening with regard to negotiations between the Board of Mayor and Aldermen and the school teachers. I wish they would give us a peek, so to speak, and let us know what's going on. I feel for teachers. I'm surprised they're as quiet as they are, but so be it. If I hadn't had a contract for over a year, I think I'd be hopping up and down a little louder than this. But from what I hear, there are some rumblings of disquiet within the MEA, and that just comes from lots of different sources. But it seems to me that, given the fact that we're not hearing an awful lot from teachers, that there's something amiss, because for the average person on the street, certainly for people who don't have children in Manchester schools, you would not be aware that the largest group of workers in the city is working without a contract, and not for the first time in recent years. And even if you have children in the city, I would be tempted to wager that the majority of parents with kids in the Manchester school system are unaware of the fact that their teachers continue to work without a contract. So, and for whatever it's worth, on my behalf, I would like to say a sincere thank you to the many, many hundreds of you who are teachers, who are out there doing your job every day and continuing to teach the young people in our city, and to continue to do the things you're doing. The amount of extracurricular work that I see teachers doing every day, I am deeply grateful for it. I wish that your plight were better known, and I honestly don't understand exactly what is happening with the teachers organisation, or the teachers union in the city. I just don't know. But the silence is notable. Next week is school vacation week, and of course that brings us to what do people do with their kids? And there's a thing called Winterfest, which is run through the Office of Youth Services. I'm sorry, I've got something in my eye. It runs through the Office of Youth Services, and it's a whole list of activities. According to the Office of Youth Services website, if you go to the City of Manchester's website, or and go to Office of Youth Services, or if you Google Office of Youth Services Manchester, it will come up. But there are so many things for people to do. There are lots of free events, and then there are just lots of events. According to their website, which I'm looking at here, they have 49 events on across 16 sites, hosted by 14 organisations. And amongst them is, for instance, there's free swim time, for instance, at SNU, at the Southern New Hampshire University swimming pool. Now, you do need to go to the Office of Youth Services to pick up a pass, because there's a limited number of passes. I think it's 75. So you go to the Office of Youth Services, you pick up a pass, and then you can swim. I think it's on Friday morning for 3 hours or something at SNU. But what a nice thing to do in the middle of the winter. There's also at Mayor Joyce Craig's office on, maybe I can find it here, at Mayor Joyce Craig's office on, I think it's Wednesday, is it? Or it's called What's the Scoop? Anyway, it's free ice cream, if you can believe that. So I just can't see it right here. There's too many things going on all these days. Oh yeah, here it is. What's the Scoop? 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. on Wednesday, February 27th. Ice cream with Mayor Craig at Manchester City Hall in the automatic chambers on the third floor. All ages are welcome. Ooh, I might show up myself. Children must be with an adult. But it's free. Free ice cream from 1 to 3 p.m. on Wednesday. But there's lots of other things on here. Lots of things going on in the City Library and in the West Side Library. Most of those are free. For instance, on Tuesday night next week, if you're not sitting here watching me, or just after you finished watching me, at 7:30, there's SNU versus Assumption men's basketball game is on, and that's free entrance. So on that particular night, so on Tuesday the 26th, you could watch this program next week, and once it's over, you could take your kids, go out the door, and go watch a really good men's basketball game at SNU. So there's a whole list of there are activities on, and then there are camps and things at the Courier Gallery. There's an art camp. There's actually at Northwest Elementary, I believe it is running a drama club for the week, which is free, and the kids are going to put on a show at the end of it. There's basketball for kids on at Beach Street School. There are a lot of things, and particularly for people who are, what do they call it now, unwaged, people who are out of work, or people who don't have a lot of money or can't afford to jet off to hotter climes or something. And I remember when my kids were little, and the challenge of keeping them occupied and entertained was always there, and we put a lot of effort into making sure that we not that we kept them occupied all the time, but simply that they had lots of opportunities when they were off from school to do different things. And the Office of Youth Services has a whole list of things here that's well worth looking at, and I would commend them to people. It's one of the many things in the city of Manchester that go on that many people aren't aware of. And particularly kudos to all the organisations who put all these things on. There's stuff on also at the the Science Museum, the Manchester Historical Society, the Manchester Museum with John Clayton's establishment, the Courier Gallery, as I mentioned. There are multiple programs on for children of all different ages. So look them up. And out of the Audubon Society, there's a camp on for the week. Actually, it's $44 for members, $54 for non-members, but still, these things are out there if you want to try them out. The biggest thing, I guess, is if you don't do anything, you're going to end up sitting at home, kids sitting around the house. Monday becomes Wednesday. Before you know it, it's Friday, and the week has been wasted. So get out there and have some fun. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I was looking to see if the coffee and conversation with the superintendent was coming up anytime soon. But the next one is on the 13th and 14th of March, I think it is. So a little ways to go to go yet. The big issue. And a big issue. I consider it a big issue. I dealt with it last week, but I wanted to share some more with you tonight, and that is regarding the agreement between the City of Manchester and and Trinity High School to develop Derryfield Park and put in a turf field there, and to add a grandstand and bleachers, and in phase 2 to add a 3,000 square foot bathroom and changing room and concession facility right there at Derryfield. And I'd like to say at the outset, as I did before, I want to be clear that I object to this. To the way in which this deal was done, and I object to the outcome of the deal. What I do not object to is, or put it in the positive, I think that a beautiful stadium, as this is proposed to be, co-developed by the city and Trinity High School. The proposal, as currently written, is that it's $4.2 million. 2.7 million for the fields and stands, etc., and all the accoutrements, and then 1.4 for the concession and dressing rooms and bathrooms, etc., for a total of $4.2 million, and that would be funded 60%. That the city would issue a bond, in other words, a city loan, for 15 years, and that the bond payments would be paid jointly by the city and by Trinity, and that Trinity High School, or at least the Catholic Bishop of Manchester, as it says in the agreement, doing business as. So Trinity High School would pay 60% of the annual cost of the bond, and the City of Manchester would pay 40%. And that comes out to be $120,000 a year from the City of Manchester, and $180,000 from Trinity. So it's close to 50-50, but it's 60-40. And so at the end of 15 years, the field would be paid for, and the city would have just a really nice facility that is lit, so it can be used at nighttime, after hours, or when it's dark. And also, because it's a synthetic field, it doesn't suffer from the wear and tear that grass fields do. The problem with grass fields is that you play so many games on them, and then they need to be rested. As an example, at Manchester North, at Livingston Park, the big season there is in the fall, the months of September and October. And by the time you get to the end of October, now there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids, some of them little and some of them not so little, playing on there. And so after 2 months, those fields are in pretty, they're in pretty rough shape, and have to be rested, and it takes them a long time to recover and get ready. And we have to always, or when I was on the board there, we had to limit use to them and make sure that they were rested. And it was always a struggle, and continues to be. With artificial turf, that's not the case. So you can have different sports playing one after the other. It's really a matter of scheduling. And outside of the time when there's snow covering those fields, they're pretty much usable with lights around the clock and constantly. So that would be a wonderful thing. My disfavor, or my objection to this project, is the way in which the deal is being done, because under this agreement, control of the field is being handed over to Trinity High School, so they have ultimate control of the field, and that I object to. I think if I had my wish, there is no reason why Trinity High School couldn't have everything that it desires and wants. And actually, in the original letter sent from the principal of Trinity to the city, suggesting this and hoping that it could happen, none of the things that were eventually granted by the city were asked for in that first inquiry. Under the current agreement that was written in 2009, Trinity High School basically has first dibs on those two fields, and one of them is shared pretty much with softball leagues and with Manchester East Cobras, and so but it is Trinity has first use, and so renewing that agreement with a much better facility and giving Trinity everything that they would desire, so that whatever number of teams they have for their football team and their soccer team and their lacrosse or whatever else they do, I think it would be perfectly fine if they were given the time they need for those teams to practice and to play, and then that the rest of the time, since it is a public park and it is owned by the people of the City of Manchester, and the City of Manchester is the one procuring the funding in order for this whole deal to go on anyway, and the City of Manchester is paying 40% of the cost of the whole project, it would seem to me only right that the city retain ultimate control of the city of the park, and it not be handed over to private enterprise. I hope people understand that. Some haven't, and this is, as I've said before, this is not that comfortable for me because many of the people, I know a lot of the people at Trinity. As a Catholic, a proud Catholic myself, I'm a big fan of Catholic education. My problem is that so long as the public schools in the city are the way that they are and in need of fields. If the other schools in the city had the fields they needed and there was no pressure on for fields, and somehow that we were going to build a new stadium because everything else had been done for the few hundred kids at Trinity, then God bless them. But that's not the case. So I want to share with you a letter that I sent to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. Now, the actual deal was passed 2 weeks ago, very quickly. The draft agreement was passed. I've spoken to many of the aldermen in the interim between the time that deal was passed and today, and many of them were unaware. It went under their radar. So I had said to them, I told each of them when I spoke to them that I was going to leave the politics of this to one side. That is the whole, because I described the tone deafness on their behalf, and the whole the picture of it, the way in which it looked was appalling for them. That at a time when there was a spending freeze on in the City of Manchester, when there's no money for anything, there's a spending freeze on in the school district, I mean. There's obviously no spending freeze on for the aldermen. But there's a spending freeze in place for the City of Manchester schools, so there's no money for anything. There are open positions. There are shortages in all kinds of areas, and in the face of this, for the aldermen to find $120,000 a year to fund a bond for playing fields, for any playing fields, is a problem. But for playing fields for a private religious school, not in the public school system, and under the agreement allowing that private religious school to charge a fee to the public school kids to have their teams played there, was just appalling, just very difficult. But I wanted to leave that to one side, because I'm not going to be shouting. If they can't see that, then we're wasting our time. My point that I made in this letter, and that I would like to read to you here, is that it was a bad deal for the city, because we're handing over control of a private enterprise, a private park, to control of a public park to a private religious organisation. And Much as I like Catholic education and I'm an admirer of its history and tradition, I'm the subject of Catholic education myself, and for those who can afford it, good for them if they like that. Anyway, it depends on which school you go to, where, when, why, and how. So let me just read this piece for you. So it says the proposed development at Derryfield Park. To the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, I start off by saying it is good for the City of Manchester to seek partnerships where it may with private enterprise to help in the development and improvement of athletic and recreation facilities for the people and children of the city. The City of Manchester should never cede control of its public parks and recreation facilities to a private religious group. Trinity could have all the use that it needs for all its teams without having year-round and permanent control of a valuable public asset. So that pretty should lay it out. I'm not opposed to Trinity having this, and one alderman said that on his program that I was envious of it on behalf of the kids of Manchester or something, and that's not the emotion from which I'm coming. So, Derryfield Park is an important recreation facility for the residents of the City of Manchester. It includes 2 playing fields. It also contains 4 tennis courts and a children's playground. It is the site of what USA Track and Field states is one of the toughest cross-country courses in New England, and that is widely regarded as one of the top 5 courses in the Northeast. Ceding public control of a playing field right in the centre of this park is contrary to the public interest and seriously limits the city's ability to use or develop this park in future years. So it makes no sense to take a park like Derryfield Park, which is when you include the area that is the cross-country track that runs through some water conservation area, it's bigger than Livingston Park, which includes Dores Pond. It's a big area, and to take a prime piece of property right in the middle of it and hand it over to a private religious group and say, here, you can control it, you can decide who comes in here, you can decide what you're going to do with it, is simply not right. So, as I said, it seriously limits the city's ability to use or develop the park in future years. I go on to say that it has been incorrectly stated that Trinity already has control of these fields dating back from a 2009 agreement. That is not so. Now, I've taken issue with Mayor Craig in this because of this assertion over the last couple of weeks, and I've spent some time, and I've gone and gotten the document, the 2009 agreement, and read it. It's not very long. It's a much shorter document than the one currently, than the one that was brought forward to the board a couple of weeks ago. And in that, as I say here, the 2000 agreement allows Trinity, quotation marks, priority scheduling, close quotation marks, at the fields. This is entirely different from handing over all control of the field for up to 35 years. The current situation is that the City of Manchester, through the Department of Parks and Recreation, has control of the scheduling of these fields, and Trinity is given first priority for their team's needs. The new agreement cedes all authority over the city's asset to a private religious group. While there is some squiggle language about other leagues, etc., it expressly states this: the city hereby grants the right to Trinity to use, occupy, and manage the city's lands and improvements thereon forming the park. I think that's pretty explicit. The city hereby grants the right to Trinity to use, occupy, manage the city's lands and improvements thereon forming the park. Later on in the agreement, it also states, and I quote, Trinity shall be solely responsible for the management of the lower field, which is the field in question. This would be the field with the turf on it and the grandstand and bleachers and lights and everything else. So just to repeat, Trinity shall be solely responsible for the management of the lower field. And then later again in the contract, lest there be, as I write here, lest there be any doubt as to whether the city or Trinity controls the fields, it states in paragraph 10 of one of the subparagraphs, it says, the city, its agents and representatives may enter into the subject premises for the purpose of inspection upon providing Trinity 24 hours prior written notice. So, we've got somebody online, I think, or we had, perhaps. I don't see someone here right now.
Eddie.
Eddie, okay. Go ahead, caller.
Hey, Jim.
Hi, is this Eddie?
Yes, it is, Jim.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Great, thanks. What's going on?
Hey, Jim, you seem very focused on this subject, right?
I am.
And I hesitate to use the word obsessed, but we'll say focused, right?
Yeah, because I'm not obsessed. I'm obsessed about bigger things than this.
Right. But see, here's the thing, Jim. I get it, right? Because I'm the same way with other things that go on in the city, right?
Right.
I'm the same way when it comes to firefighters getting bonuses for fires they never showed up to. I'm
Right.
the same way when it comes to chief days, snow days, right?
Right.
I'm the same way when they increase the minimum on special duty pay for police from 3 hours to 4. I'm the same way when they instituted hazardous duty pay for the police. I'm the same way with a lot of things. I'm the same way with the absolute refusal to seriously consider closing down a school building. See, the thing is, Jim, if we had fiscally conservative values consistently and across the board, then we'd have the money for paper for school kids.
Mm-hmm.
See what I'm saying? We'd have the
do.
money for supplies. We'd have the money for copier fluid. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I hear what you're saying, and some of those points, when we spoke last week, you you heard my response. For instance, it seems to me I know the whole thing about chief days. Now I don't know the details of it, right? I'm like the guy who reads the Union Leader on that, and it's not that I don't care as a taxpayer. I do, but I didn't, dig into it. But it seemed to me in that case that I was thinking to myself, what a load of garbage this is. This is like wasteful spending that's just run away. And I see teachers starting at $35,000 a year, maxing out at 72 or 73 after a lifetime's work in the city. That's the pay range for the most highly qualified teachers in the city. And then I see things like chief days, and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Teachers
Right.
don't have. So
I
do.
We talked about this last week, Jim, right?
Yeah.
But I'm kind of expanding on it, right?
Yeah.
Because I get focused just like you. You're very focused on this one thing, and I understand it.
I'm focused on schools.
Yeah, and I think we have to have a broader view, though. We have to look at the whole picture.
Yep. No,
It's healthy to take the wider view.
Yes, I understand that. I agree with you. But the school district is a pretty wide view, right? I'm not disagreeing with you. I think that if the school district were ever to get to the point where it wasn't the least well-funded school system in the state, and all the other things you've heard me say, greatest number of kids in the class, all that stuff, right? If we could ever get off that bottom rung, then it'd be time to sort of, I could spend some of my energy looking at other stuff. But as you know, for any one department or any one area of the city, it takes a while to get one's head around it. Why I am bothered by this particular deal here is because we're taking a public enterprise and we're handing it over to a private religious group. And much as I like the guys at Trinity, and they're all good guys, and many of them are buddies of mine and all that stuff, it just doesn't make it right. And it's a lousy deal for the city. And what I'm going to go on to talk about is the fact that Trinity gets to keep all the revenue from the naming rights to this stadium, from the advertising in the stadium, from every event in the stadium, from the concessions in the stadium, from the rentals of the stadium. And they'll be paying for it for 15 years, but they get to keep it for 35. They'll have 20 years free and clear, where every dime coming out of that stadium, which might be huge money by the time you and I are in our 90s, right? That will go 100% to a religious group in the city. And nobody knew that Bishop Bradley would have been closed when we were looking at it from 35 years ago. Trinity was down to whatever it was down to 2 years ago. It couldn't even field a football team. Who knows who we're signing the agreement? The agreement is signed with the Roman Catholic Bishop of Manchester, so we don't know who actually would have control of our field in 30 years' time or how it might be used. I just think it's very...
Right, Jim.
I hate the idea of the city...
I'm going to go give someone else a chance, but listen, I'll leave you with this. I'd be happy with $72,000 a year, but... Listen,
You'd be happy with what?
Go. Take care.
I didn't hear that. Just say that again. You'd be happy with what?
$72,000 a year.
Oh, okay, yeah. All right, Ed. Gotcha. All right, man.
All right.
Thank you.
Care,
Thank you. Yeah, 72,000 was for teachers, but when you get to the end of your career, and if you've stayed there and you've worked all the way through it, and you've got a master's degree, and you've been a good student in school, and you've gotten your degree, and then you've gotten your teaching certificate, and you've kept up all your CEUs, and you've got a master's degree, and you're the highest qualified teacher in the state, you can eventually get to 72. Compare that to other employees in the city. But I take Ed's point about if there's a list of places in the city where money is being wasted, then I'm all for those being people shining the light on them. It's just that I'm not going to lose focus on the piece that I do, because at that point that's easy then not to call this out, because this isn't being called out and this affects schools. There's a school across the street from where this $4.2 million stadium is going to be built, called Hillside Middle School. It's exactly, I measured it on Google Maps, it's exactly 420 feet from the front door. That's feet, not yards, not miles, not furlongs. It's 420 feet. Even for little kids, that's not much of a walk. It's the size of someone's backyard. Decent sized backyard, but still, it's 420 feet from the front doors of Hillside to the corner of this new field. And there are about 850 kids in Hillside today. And in a year and a half from now, 5th grade will be added in there onto the 6th, 7th, and 8th that's there right now. So there'll be about 1,200 kids. Something between 11 and 1,200 kids will be going to school in Hillside every day. The field next to Hillside is unusable, so there isn't any field for them to play on. Can you imagine looking out the windows of the classes at Hillside, looking across the street 420 feet to a $4.2 million development, co-developed by the City of Manchester and Trinity High School for the benefit of 250 kids, half of whom don't even live in Manchester, don't come from Manchester? Does anybody not see that that's a problem? I think it's a huge problem. But I digress. Thank you, Ed, for the call. I do, like I said, I want to hear all the views, because it's not like I have all the answers. So, as I was saying, this is entirely different from handing over all control of the field for up to 35 years. The current situation is that the City of Manchester, through the Department of Parks and Rec, has control of the scheduling of these fields, and Trinity is given first priority for their team's needs. The new agreement cedes all authority over the city's asset to a private religious group. While there is some squiggle language about other leagues, etc., it expressly states that the city hereby grants the right to Trinity to use, occupy, and manage the city's lands and improvements thereon. I said this already, right? And then it also states Trinity has sole responsibility for managing the field. Later in the contract, lest there be any doubt as to whether the city or Trinity controls the fields, it states in paragraph 10, the city, its agents and representatives may enter into the subject premises for the purpose of inspection upon providing Trinity 24 hours prior written notice. For the next 35 years, if the city and residents of Manchester are not allowed access to these public fields, they will have no standing in law to regain control or to force agreement. This is the first time in the history of Manchester, as far as I'm aware, where effective control of a public park is handed over to a private entity. I just can't. I just don't believe. Actually, what I can't understand is how the city attorneys sat down and reached this agreement. I've put myself in the position of, if I were a property owner and I owned a piece of property and I had a developer come to me who said, let's co-develop it, not buy it. He doesn't want to pay me a dime. He's not giving me a penny for the property. I own it, and it's on the corner of a really nice street in Manchester. I own it free and clear, and the guy says, let's do a co-development. You know what? I'll pay you if are you able to get the loan, because I can't, or I can get it on very good rates. So I say, yeah, I'll get the loan. You'll make 60% of the payments. I'll make 40% of the payments. Okay, and we're going to co-develop this thing. Okay, great. That sounds good to me. So that might be a good thing to do. But would I give him complete control of it then and say, do with it whatever you want? Oh, and by the way, keep all the revenue, whatever you make out of it. I'll just sit here with my head in my hands. I'll be making nothing. You make 100% of whatever the business makes. And oh, by the way, as you read down here, when you're finished with it after 35 years, we've both stopped paying for it after 15. You have 20 years where every penny comes out of the development is going to be yours. Every penny. I can't get a dime. If you happen to be making $500,000 a year out of it in 2049 with 5 years still to go, I'm going to sit here with nothing. And then to really rub salt in the wounds, when you're finished with it, you get to hand it back in as is condition. That's an agreement written by the city. That at the end of all of this, if the Catholic Church or Trinity were to have this facility for the next 35 years, at the end of it, after the city co-paying for the development and building the building and putting in turf fields and stands and lighting and everything, whatever condition they want to hand it back in, there you go, buddy. Thanks for being around. By the way, we kept all the money. It's not even an attempt at it. It says 100% of the revenue goes to the Catholic Church. 100%. Thanks, taxpayers. Thanks for showing up. That's a lovely field you have. We'd like to use it until 2054. And we're going to keep the money. Good. And by the way, never mind. So, my question next, this letter was 3 pages long, so how does the board defend building and handing over the keys to a state-of-the-art facility with showers, changing rooms, bathrooms, concession area in a park where there are little kids playing on the playground equipment with no facilities? The board should look at the needs of the whole Derryfield Park. If the city is going to borrow money to pay for these facilities, they should be available to the many thousands of athletes and children who attend cross-country events, play in the play area, or attend the middle school overlooking the proposed stadium. That seems pretty simple to me. If I was building a $1.4 million, 3,000 square foot bathrooms, changing rooms, and showers, how does it make any sense when you have one of the top 5 cross-country facilities in the northeastern United States, where we have colleges, universities, high schools who come? There are buses there during the summertime and spring and fall, lined up and down on the streets. The roads are blocked off while there are tents put up by all these schools and colleges. There are thousands of people there at these cross-country events. And right in the middle of that, you're going to have a $4.2 million privately run facility with bathrooms, showers, and changing rooms, and the city doesn't have a key for them. And even if it had a key, it would have to ask permission if it could use them or not. And even if it got the answer yes, it would have to pay a fee to do so. Like, are you kidding me? How can an alderman sign this document? I have great respect for them. I have more respect for them this week, actually, than ever before, because I reached out to many of them, and I got a call back from there was one I wasn't able to reach, and so of those I reached, I ended up speaking to all of them but one, and I'm grateful for that, because they don't always, it's not like they agree with me all the time. I'm certainly not, important, I think, in their eyes. I don't think many aldermen in Manchester, sit around worrying about what Jim O'Connell thinks too much. And I'm not being self-deprecating. I just think that's the way it is. They've got a whole city to run, and it wouldn't even be right for them to be sort of listening to one voice. Part of the reason why this lousy deal is going down is because they are listening to some voices, and some voices have more power than others. So, I go on. There is a plan to develop the fields at Memorial High School that has been languishing without funding for 20 years. Those are fields that were to be developed in addition to the field that's there. The fields that are contiguous to it to be used by Southside, by Southside and by Memorial, and maybe even Jewett Street too, but certainly Southside. And that's not been funded. It's been sitting around there for 20 years. The field next to Hillside has been unusable for the best part of 25 years, and there's no plan to fund it. The track at Memorial is no longer fit to use and needs to be replaced. None of that's getting bonded. Now, the real issue, of course, is that we need equipment in classrooms. We need textbooks. We need technology. We need computers. We need more teachers. We need lots of things. But of the things that we could bond,
Jim,
yes.
You got 10 minutes to go if you want to leave 10 minutes early, okay?
All righty. Thank you. I'm going to leave a little early tonight because I have to make it to City Hall. So it's just amazing to me. So again, I want to get to the end of this. Under the draft contract approved by the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, Trinity gets naming rights for the new grandstand and other parts of the new stadium. Trinity also is granted the right to retain for itself 100% of all revenues from this new $4.2 million stadium. How can this be justified? I've challenged every alderman I've talked to and said, besides the fact we're actually the ones giving them the field, we own the field, the people own the field. And the people are the ones who are facilitating this by borrowing the money. And in fairness to Trinity, it is funding 60% of the repayments over the 15 years, and the taxpayers are refunding 40%. So that's why I think they should be given everything that they want in terms of usage and like everything. A beautiful stadium, there for their use. All their teams get to use it. They get to practice on it. My argument has to do with the control. So I ask, how can this be justified? The taxpayers of Manchester own the field. They are paying 40% of the cost of the development and they are providing the financing. Why is it not 40-60 split on revenues? If there is a major event at Derryfield Park where thousands of people are attracted to the park, why is it just Trinity, a private enterprise, should get to use the city's facility to generate profit and then retain 100% of the revenue? How does that make sense? I know that many aldermen have no business experience, but it should be obvious to everyone that profits and revenues should be shared in the same proportion as the costs. The proposed $4.2 million stadium could be a wonderful addition to the City of Manchester, but only if the public can actually access it. It is unconscionable and unjust that the Board of Mayor and Aldermen have decided to bond the city's taxpayers to pay for what is essentially a private facility and a loss of public property contrary to the claims of the Mayor and board members. The facility is twice as close to Hillside Middle School, 420 feet, as it is to Trinity, 920 feet. Is there no embarrassment in the juxtaposition of a private school with 250 students having the use of a state-of-the-art stadium and clubhouse, while the 850 students at the adjacent public middle school have no field? It is planned to add 5th grade to Hillside next year, bringing the school population to close to 1,200. Why would the city finance a private field for 200 and some students when there are 1,200 kids in a public school closer to the site? Lastly, if the City of Manchester is to fund a $1.2 million, it's actually $1.4 million bathroom, shower and changing room at Derryfield Park, then it should be under city control, not in the hands of a small private enterprise for the benefit of a few. When there are large cross-country events at Derryfield, would it not be right to open such a facility for the use of the runners and their supporters? When thousands of children and parents sit on the grass slopes to watch the fireworks on July 4th, would it not be right to open such an expensive facility to the public? Under this agreement, Trinity has control of the keys and has no obligation to open it. The basic proposal here is still defendable if there was a realistic and enforceable element of shared usage. Trinity could have access to this new facility for its various sports teams for their games and practices. This should not mean that the Parks and Recreation Department, the Department of Public Works, no longer has ultimate authority over public land. The city should renegotiate this contract to ensure that Trinity is granted adequate and equitable use of this public asset while retaining the city's ability to manage public property. Here's some questions. So, why is it being said that Trinity had control since 2009 when they did not? it just is it's the lever by which you can get everything else done. By telling the public what is a lie, and I'm calling it a lie now because anybody repeating it after this week knows they're lying because they've all seen the document, or anybody who wished to has seen the document and read it. And under the other agreement, Trinity had first dibs on use of a field. So I'd like to know why people were saying that in the beginning, because most of the aldermen who were put to bed and sleep on this were told, don't worry about it, they've had this since 2009, it's just a continuation. Why does this agreement grant ultimate control of public property to a religious group? Why are our public schools required to pay for the use of the field? Why are all revenues from naming and advertising going to a private religious group? What happens if Trinity closes in 5 years, 10 years, or 30 years? Will Hillside, which is 420 feet away, be allowed to use the field during the day for physical education? How will the city ensure that there is no discrimination allowed by this religious group? Does Trinity discriminate based on religion, race, ethnicity, or sexual orientation? I don't want to be rocking people's world here, but in 20 years from now, if West High School is playing Trinity High School, and two kids go in there with a T-shirt that says, and let's say there's an LGBTQ player playing on the West team, for example, in this scenario, and they go in with a T-shirt that says, we support LGBTQ rights. Can the Trinity management group people say, "Hey, take the shirts off and get out of the field"? You're not staying here. I don't know. You tell me, and pick all the other groups that might or might not. I'm just asking the question. In the city, it wouldn't. The city could insist that they not be discriminated against. Why is it allowed with board approval that the Catholic Church can use the field or collateral to raise a mortgage on it? So one of the paragraphs in there says that it actually puts it the other way. It says that the Catholic Church shall not have a right to raise a mortgage or encumber the property without the permission of the board, mayor, and alderman. So they actually can do it, but they just have to. By implication, if I were an attorney, I would read that. Why that paragraph is there at all? The paragraph should say, you're not allowed to raise a mortgage against this property. It's not yours. By raising it, putting it in a document, and having both parties sign it, you're saying that they can't do it unless they get permission of the board, mayor, and alderman. Why does the Catholic Church continue to get 100% of the revenue from the stadium for 35 years, including the 20 years from 2034 to 2054 when it's not paying anything for the fields? So whatever it's making, whether it's $5,000 a year or $500,000 a year, they get to keep it. All the while, the city kids are going to be down in Hillside or over at Parkside or wherever they are with no field to play on, if things stay as they are. And then lastly, why is the Catholic Church only required to hand back the field in an as-is condition at the end of the agreement? Why is that the case? Why is it not asked to keep the fields in a proper condition and maintain them in the order in which they were given them? And then lastly, my last point was to fund a $4.2 million stadium for a small religious school and allow public schools to be charged by them to use it is patently unjust. It's a bad deal for the people and taxpayers of Manchester, and it should be renegotiated. Yours respectfully, Jim O'Connell. So that's the letter that I sent to the board, mayor, and alderman. I despair that a contract like this can get through when there's no need for it. According to the inquiry made by Trinity to begin with, this is not what they were asking for. Whatever happened during negotiations, I don't know, but I would say that the city pretty much gave up anything that it possibly could have retained. And to finish, I want to say my purpose here is not to do any damage to Trinity. I think this deal can go forward with Trinity getting everything that they want, everything. That they get full use of the field with no restriction for all their teams and all their practices, that they're paying enough for it, let all that to happen. What they don't get to do is control what's happening there in the middle of, when they're not using it, when the schools are out, when there's weekends, when they have nothing going on. They're not the ones who get to decide. And then they don't get to keep the public's money from a public facility for 35 years. That just makes no sense. So I leave you with that, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry I have to leave early tonight. Thank you thank you to Ed for calling, and we'll see you again next week. Have a great vacation week if we don't see you in the meantime. All the best. Bye bye from Jim O'Connell.